are now into week 5, and what we're going to talk about in week 5 is looking at communication style influences and how it can shape the relationship process in sales. We'll identify 2 major dimensions of the communication style model. We'll explain the 4 communication styles in the communication model, and then we'll learn how to identify your preferred communication style and that of your customer. And then we'll learn how to adapt interpersonal versatility and build strong selling relationships with the selling style flexing. So you'll see that there is an adaptive style training video series, and highly recommend that you go out to the publisher and be able to look at that video. Again, you can look at the back of your book. It will tell you who they are. But we have communication styles, and we hinted at it a little bit in the last chapter. I know one of the things I didn't mention in the last chapter was your voice and how you can control your voice. And that really becomes part of your communication style as well. For example, you can create a style bias where you may not like something about somebody, and the one that we typically hear is, oh, their voice just drives me nuts. Maybe sometimes it's very raspy or very high or very low. All of those things can be distracting when you're talking to somebody. So what this chapter is talking about is where they're going to define all of these different areas, but at the heart of what they're saying is that you have to basically what's called read the room, which is that you have to learn to be able to adjust your style to meet the needs of whoever it is that you're talking to when you're a salesperson. So let me give you an example. As you can hear from my voice, I have a very low kind of husky voice. And if I let myself be natural, I sound like this. But there are times when I am going and let's say I'm calling on a gatekeeper and I'm trying to get to somebody else. I will pitch my voice higher because that little girl voice can sometimes get someone's attention versus a more commanding, low, husky voice that is very, in some ways, masculine, very authoritative. So sometimes I'll pitch it up high like this and say, oh, hi, I'm really calling to talk to so-and-so, and I'm really stuck at trying to figure out who I need to talk to, and I was hoping that you could help me. So you hear the difference in how I pitch my voice, and that has worked very well for me, but everybody has their own style, and that's what this whole, talking about your communication style, that's what we're working towards, is that you can figure out through trial and error. And I hope that you're going out and testing what you're learning on people around you, whether it's your family or if you're in the workplace, put these practices in place and see how they work, because the best way to do it is to try it. So remember that, again, we have these internal biases and we don't always know how to explain them. We just know what we don't like. And so, again, that's why we're talking about being versatile. So when we talk about the communication style model, there's a dominance continuum, a sociability continuum, and those 2 styles are really at the heart of how people perceive. So when I said that my voice sounds authoritative, that's the dominance. It can sometimes sound like I'm telling you what to do because of the tone of my voice, because it's husky, or because the way I speak or project. But sometimes I have to scale that back when I'm talking to somebody because I'm watching their reactions and I'm seeing that they're not bonding with me, that there's still this distance. I don't feel them like really kind of building a relationship with me. That's when I have to start to adjust how I engage with them and look at this continuum of dominance or sociability. Sociability can sometimes be just listening to people, sitting back and asking questions, using your facial emotions to be able to convey, sympathy and empathy or interest in somebody. So there's these continuums that you have to balance all the time. And then we go into the 4 styles of communication, which is emotive, and they talk about, let's say, Oprah Winfrey. She's very emotive because she's listening to people and she's asking questions, and then she might chime in with some of her own experiences that align with what somebody has said. So there's also a directive style, which is where there's a higher dominance and lower sociability. That works for some people too. When you listen to Tony Robbins, for example, The motivational speaker, there's some times where he's very social, but he's also sometimes very dominant. When he's saying, please don't do this, it's going to harm you, because he's got the experience, and he's also mentored thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people at this point, that he's now got this reliability factor of knowing what works and what doesn't work. So read through those examples of that. There's also a supportive style, and there's also a reflective style. Each of these styles are things that you're going to build on a continuum, that when you are reading the room as you get to know people, you'll know how to dial it down or dial it up. So make sure you're reading that, because that becomes, I think, one of the most important parts of sales, is knowing how to be aware of your surroundings, aware of people's feelings, so that you can adjust your behaviors and your voice and your tone to reflect, so that you watch them. And you can literally watch someone become more comfortable with you when you start out a certain way, but then you dial it back. So as you test that out, you can, again, you should be testing it out to find out, how do you do these? It's one thing to read it on a piece of paper and say, well, yeah, I get this concept. But it's another thing to put it into practice. So I highly encourage you to, even with your family, if you're in the middle of a fight with your family member, dial it down. Take a different approach. Bring your voice level down. Start making more direct eye contact, or actually, sometimes that's not good. Look away. Even in the animal kingdom, for example, if you come across a mountain lion, you do not stare it in the eye. You look down and back up. So it's the same thing in the humans. You've got to learn when to look away and kind of dial it back, or when to make eye contact and show your confidence. And so there's this delicate balance, and that's all that means, is that you have to be able to understand them. And then minimizing that communication style basis, there are ways to be able to do that bias. And it talks about nature and miniature behaviors, strength and weakness paradox. Those are all different things that you can use on that continuum. So really kind of make sure that you're looking through that. And then again, what you're going to find is that you're going to build stronger relationships with people when you do what's called the style flexing, which is where you are adaptive, that you read the room, that you know how to be able to adjust your behaviors based on other people. Because again, remember this, you're trying to influence them to buy something from you. So they're in the power position, you're not. So you have to be able to adjust your communication style. And I always ask my students, and when I do a little test in my classes, my face-to-face classes, I'll have them raise their hands. How many people prefer an email? A certain percentage will raise their hands. How many people prefer a phone call? A certain percentage will raise their hand. How many people prefer a text? A certain percentage will raise their hand. And what that means is that everybody has their own preferred style of communicating. But that does not mean that your customer has that preferred style. So you have to get to know what your customer likes, and you have to communicate with them in the way that they want to be communicated with. Otherwise, you will probably not be as successful at sales, because that is what sales is learning your customer's needs and what it takes to be able to build that relationship with them. So read through the exercises in the chapter, the learning activities, and making sure that you really do understand, because this chapter is really important, not just for sales, but actually in life. And so it really becomes important to make sure you understand, because as Socrates said, know thyself. And know thyself means that you have to know yourself in order to be able to make adjustments so that other people can hear you. Because if they become angry with you, if they block you out, they're not hearing you anymore. And as a salesperson, that's the death of a sale. So it really becomes important.